today's tutorial. In the last tutorial, we actually explored how to work with how to transform a JSON object to an XML object. But however, today we want to actually do something, work with something that is has a little bit of numbers in it. The idea is to be able to get familiar with what we are trying to do, how to understand the scenarios better. Because what we just did in the previous scenario was just a transformation from a JSON to an XML, which is not it happens. It happens. We have some scenarios like that, but however, most times what we are trying to do in when we are using an integration or an integration like this, we are trying to process data further or just handle further processing between two various data sources. So basically, today we just want to actually take a step backwards and do something pretty similar to what we did last time, sending a JSON file, and it returns out the sum of those two numbers for us. So it's going to be something pretty simple, but the idea is to teach us, help us build further on how the processing works. So I'm just going to go back into my Boomi. I'm going to create a new process. So okay, so I'll try and click on new. I'm working in this folder, so I'm just going to call this add numbers. I'll create. So first of all, my first connector, because it's going to be I'm going to be creating an endpoint. I'm going to be using a web server. So that's a web service server, and it's going to be listen. So I'll just call this listing, and I'll design the operation. For the operation here, I'll just I love giving it proper names. Listener, add number. So it's going to be a get because we are sending in the data into this API. The next thing, the object type. What is I'm going to give you an object type. I'll call it add number. Yeah. So the input type is going to be a JSON, a single JSON object. What's the requested profile? I'm going to create one. I'll call this two numbers. So I'm just going to I'll create one manually. So when I click, I always have the root element. When you have the root element, what you want to really do is turn it to make it an object. So when you have an object, in the object you can actually create multiple entities, multiple fields inside, multiple structures inside. So now I'm going to just create number one, and the second one I'm going to call this number two. Okay, I can actually make this number, yeah, that would be the best thing to do. Okay, so I can say this. My output response is going to be a JSON file as well, but now I'm going to give us, we are returning a sum. So I'm going to do the same thing. I'll create one, the sum. I'll create one manually. From the root, I go to object. In the object, I click on add entry. So yeah, I just call it the sum. So basically, at the end of the day, we would be expecting to have something like this. Number one, and for this we'll have number two, and the results would have, for the results we are going to have the sum. Okay, so we are actually going to have, this will be the structure of our data. We'll send in two numbers into Boomi and expect a result like this. So that's all we just did in this previous step. Just trying to create the profiles. So I can now save and close this. Yeah. Then the next thing I want to do is I want to map, just do a little addition and actually return it back to the user. So the next I just want to, I'll call this process a new map function. What am I working with? I'm working with two JSON objects, two JSON, so two numbers, yes, and also the output also is JSON, but we are going to be returning the sum. Now if you notice here, we have two numbers and the sum, so we can't just map this. We need to create a function in between. So I'll just rename this first, processor. I'm going to create a function in between, and we can do a numeric function here. We can do math add, which is simple. It adds two numbers together. So what's the first value? We'll call it number 1. You can give it any name you want. The second one, we call it number 2. Okay. So automatically we have this function. All we just need to do is to map number 1 to this and this to this, and the result we map it out to the sum. And basically that's all. That's all pretty much. So we can close this. We click OK here. Then the next thing we want to do is we want to actually send this result out back to the user. And remember, normally we always end our process with either a stop or the return. So because we want to return it back to the sender, we use a return function here, a return document here. I'll just call it return. It's ideal you learn how you give your processes the best name, so that even though we are working with other developers, it's easier for everybody to understand. So I currently just have a listener. It listens in. We have the processor that takes in the two numbers and does the multiplication for us and returns it out to the user. So like remember, in the last class, when we are working with HTTP, we can't actually test on the Boomi. We actually have to actually create a package component, and when we create a package component, we'll be able to deploy this, and we'll be able to call this using our API. So I'm going to create package components. So when I'm creating a package component. All I'm just trying to do is to just put everything in a package. Then after that, the next step will be to deploy this package. So I'm going to click on next. Typically you would put a version number based on your FSD or your structure in the organization. So it shows you the package was the component was created successfully. Then the next thing you want to do is to deploy this package. Currently I'm working on my test environment. So I'm just going to deploy this. All you just do is next. There's no much configuration here. This just shows you the versions and like it gives you a global picture of the process. So I'm going to actually be testing this API. I'll just duplicate this current tab I have. However, so the question is, what is my URL? So if you have been following the series, to get your URL is a function of two things. When you come to your manage tab, come to Boomi Atoms. When you come to Boomi Atoms, under your atom, you come to shared web server. You'll be able to see your endpoint, your base URL. However, to see the URL, the subpath, you come into your listener, and you see this /ws/simple/add numbers. So that's what we'll be using for this scenario. Yes, and I'm working with a body, a JSON file, and I'm going to be sending it two numbers like this. So I'll just put this, and I'm going to click on send, and let's see if everything works out well. So we're anxious. So we see it gives us the sum. So in this scenario, we have been able to see how to like do a little addition, how to process the data, how to give it helps give a clearer picture of functions, of mapping, the map process, the map shape. Um, Feel free to ask your questions because we'll be ending this episode here. If there are any questions, any doubts, just let me know and we'll get back to you. Thank you for watching this episode.